Hello, dear students. I hope you all had enough time to go back and watch the documentary on Mahatma Gandhi's life last week that I had shared with you all. Apart from that, we have been looking at these lectures have been looking at Indian writing in English up until 1920. That is where we have reached, starting from its early beginnings in the 18th century. And through 19th century and up until 1920, we have looked at the key writers in different genres, poetry, prose, and fiction as much as it has come up. But now we are moving on to the next era, 1920 to 1947. You all know the significance of the date 1947. But 1920 is also landmark in that it is the year in which Gandhi rises to lead the leadership of Indian national movement. The Indian nationalist movement, up until that point, largely led by the moderates of um, Indian National Congress and for briefly by the extreme radicals like Bal Gangadhar Tilak, and the leadership shifts to the hands of someone like Mahatma Gandhi. He had returned from um, South Africa after his practice there as a lawyer, and he also started formulating his non-cooperation movement and civil disobedience in South Africa. In the 1 year that he came back from 1915 to 1916, he traveled throughout the country, understanding the problems of the people. And it is only in 1916 he leads the Champaran struggle, and with that begins his political career in India. In the very short time, by 1920, in 4 years, he becomes one of the foremost leaders of the Indian nationalist movement. And this brings with it a kind of difference in the way of thought, in a kind of difference in the intellectual mood of Indian thought at this point, and it impacts Indian writing in English at this point very significantly. Things to note about this period are the shift of the nationalist movement from a middle class movement led by obviously from the Indian National Congress from the front to a mass movement. Gandhiji was a mass leader and he mobilized the masses, unified them in a way that no other leader has managed to do before, even when the first war of Indian independence took place. There was not a unified movement in the that spanned across India. There was no pan-Indian movement, and Gandhi enabled that. And this led to a development of a national consciousness and a possibility for thinking about a pan-Indian movement. This also saw a parallel development in the idea of Muslim separatism. Is after the combined struggle of 1919 in the Khilafat movement, the Hindus and Muslims start to the ideas start to diverge, and a demand for a separate country for Muslims begin to be heard very loud and clear during the period of Gandhian politics. And many other marginalized communities within India during this period, like women, youngsters, and the depressed classes, start to develop their own political sort of voice. More and more women come out into the streets protesting and demonstrating along with Gandhi and Gandhi's disciples, and they contribute very actively to uh, to the political changes that are taking place in India during this period. Yeah, there are a lot of youth associations that mobilize the youngsters of the country. And finally, there is also many leaders from the marginalized classes like the Dalits and the Bahujan communities, many leaders rising, and many of the mainstream leaders like Gandhi also took an interest in the upliftment of the marginalized classes. One person of special mention here is Dr. Baba Sahib Ambedkar, who came from among the Dalits and rose up the ranks and into the leadership of the depressed classes. There is also a rapid development of Indian industries which led to the rise of modern cities. The modernization of Indian cities, which were largely traditional, started to be modernized. And also there is the development of industries which meant the Marxist influence of class mobilization also takes place in Indian cities. This is the political climate into which climate into which these writers or we are going to discuss in this period are contributing to. Almost all of the literary production of this period, especially in English, is geared towards this political purpose of Indian independence. And maybe, probably for this reason, what we see is that there is an upsurge of fiction writing, of fiction writers in this era, but there is almost no new development in poetry or drama. There are no significant voices that are unique to this um, 3 decades that we can see in Indian poetry in English or in Indian drama. But accompanying the development in fiction, there are also a lot of uh, political prose writers, and we will be looking at some of them today, along with what happened in poetry and drama as well. Among the political prose writers of the Gandhian era, Mahatma Gandhi himself is the one of most significance to discuss. Gandhi's prose writings can be divided into 3 categories, 3 periods. One, the early London period when he was studying to be a barrister of law, and these are early writings on vegetarianism and his experiences in London, and several articles that he wrote during this early period. This is the writings of an unconfident man, young man who is still finding his individuality. He hasn't found himself or his ideologies at that point. These are very, very much writings of somebody whose voice is being formed. And during the South African period, he when he start established his um, he started his social work in South Africa. He settled near Johannesburg, and he started his political movements to uplift the Indian community who were discriminated against by the whites of apartheid Africa. And we see him establishing his first literary journal, which is the Indian Opinion, and also Hind Swaraj was published in the Indian Opinion in 1909. This was originally written in Gujarati, and in 1910, Gandhi himself translates Hind Swaraj into English. Even after 110 years, Hind Swaraj remains quite a significant and important text in Indian prose writing. And this is one thing that has a role to play in this is his vision. Hinswaraj was written as a dialogue between the reader and the reader of the Indian Opinion and the writer persona. They are having a dialogue over 20 chapters about various things, including British colonial rule. One thing that Gandhi says that is of special significance to us today is that he warns that a political upheaval is not the answer. Just by throwing the political yoke of British, Indians will not get Swaraj, is what Gandhi says. To gain true Swaraj, true independence, Indians should be able to throw away the yoke of Western machine culture. And this is something he warns Indians against at this point. and his a lot of the ideas that he proposes in Hind Swaraj, including that of Panchayati Raj, and these remain very significant even today and has been put into action in post-independence India. His ideas of civil disobedience and non-violence were also first proposed in Hind Swaraj, was first written down in Hind Swaraj. After coming back to India, in his writings can be classified, the 30 years of his writings can be classified in the Indian period. He established two journals, Young India and Harijan, and it was in the Young India, his autobiography, the story of my experiments with truth, was first serialized, but it was published in two volumes in 1927 and 1928. As you know, it is one of the most significant prose texts written by Gandhi. It talks about his own moral struggles with the moral and philosophical struggles with the idea of truth and non-violence, and how he comes up with his whole political philosophy. Is the course of that experimentation with truth is charted in this autobiography. Other significant writings by Gandhi during this period include many of his speeches. Of special mention is the Banaras Hindu University speech of 1916 and the speech at the trial of 1922. These are two speeches worth remembering. And he wrote a scathing review of Miss Mayo's Mother India, which uh, which portrayed India in a very, very unglorified kind of light. And a large number of letters that he wrote in English to many of his acquaintances are also a significant part of his writings in English. To talk about Gandhi's, so something significant about Gandhi's ideas is that he uh, one of his major ideas was Varnashrama Dharma, which he saw not as a rigid caste system but as a healthy division of work. This is one of the things that are pointed at as one of his weaknesses as well. He failed to see the uh, true violence that Varnashrama Dharma inflicts on the those in the lower strata the of this system of division of work. This is something Gandhi is accused of failing to see. But this was one of the ideas that he had close to his heart. He also propounded non-violence and peace, as you all know. His work was visionary, enduring vitality. It still holds a significance, even if you read Hind Swaraj today. There are many aspects of his arguments that are still valuable for us in our current political context. And one significant thing to note about Gandhi, the writer, is that he did not think of himself as a writer, but for him, writing was a tool to propagate propagate his ideas of truth and nonviolence and many other political ideas. So this reflected in his style as well, which was transparent, energetic, and sparse, sharp as an arrow that just hits the target, and no nonsense kind of uh, poetic prose style uh, was characteristic of Mahatma Gandhi. In the next lecture, we will continue talking about prose writings and prose and poetry writings of this period.